Martin Landau, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
It is morning indeed.
It is at the moment, yes. What is the Actors Studio?
Oh, the Actors Studio is an organization of actors that immediately, the group theater changed the course of theater throughout the world. From 1931 to 1941, Harold Clurman, Lee Strasberg, and Cheryl Crawford created a theater that was of the people. It was during the Depression in the States, a very deep depression, and the theater up until then was very theatrical and very representational in a different way. And the group theater, these people many of them went to Russia and literally sat at the feet of Stanislavski and Vakhtangov and these Russian directors. And it was an interesting kind of thing happening, a system of acting, now called the method because it was badly translated. It was really called the Stanislavski system, actually. We're known as method actors, but which is often misunderstood. At any rate, that group theater, Clifford Odets and Irwin Shaw and a bunch of writers emerged out of that, and a style of acting which was unique, an ensemble. Plays like Men in White. In fact, the reviews raved about the operating room sequence. Lee Strasberg directed that. It was a play by Sidney Kingsley. An actor in the group theater was a fellow called Clifford Odets, who became a playwright, who wrote Golden Boy, Rocket to the Moon, and plays about common people. Anyway, the style of acting changed, the style of playwriting changed, and it affected movies, because a lot of actors like Lee J. Cobb and John Garfield and Franchitone, all members of the group theater, infiltrated into Hollywood. Well, when the group broke up in 1941, Kazan felt the need to continue it in some way. So in 1947, Kazan, Robert Lewis, and Cheryl Crawford created the Actors Studio, which was a laboratory for actors to continue working between jobs and continue to develop their craft. They invited a handful of people in, and then in 1951, Lee Strasberg was asked to join the Actors Studio and became synonymous with the Actors Studio. The only way to get into the Actors Studio is to audition. You do a preliminary audition, and then you do a final audition. If you pass both, you become a life member. In the studio, when I was a young actor, was the place to be. Why? Because you were being taught by Strasberg. Kazan was there. It developed actors like Marlon Brando and Monty Clift and James Dean and Eli Wallach. It was hard to get into because Kazan, Lee Strasberg, and Cheryl Crawford were the final judges. You had to get a 1 vote, 1, 2, 3. 2, sorry. 3, sorry. 1, yes. 1, 1, 1 was necessary. The year I got in, 2,000 people auditioned, and Steve McQueen and I were the only 2 accepted that whole year. So actors, wonderful actors like Geraldine Page, she literally auditioned 6 times to get in. There was a tremendous desire to work with the best people. And in 1966, a bunch of us, having found ourselves on the West Coast in California, started the West Coast branch of the Actors Studio. At first, Lee Strasberg didn't feel it would succeed there, but virtually half the membership today is in California. Now, Mark Rydell and I run the West Coast. He's a director who directed On Golden Pond and The Rose, and Ellen Burstyn, who you will see shortly, Al Pacino and Harvey Keitel and Lee Grant all run the East Coast Actors Studio. And It's a group of actors, run by actors, about actors, for actors, that's been in existence for over half a century now. And unlike a lot of other countries, now I've lived in England and I've spent a lot of time here a Roma durante la film Cleopatra nel 1962-62, molti anni fa. We continue our training, even though we're professional actors, striving for better and better and more. The work really relates to developing the senses so they respond to stimulus, which allows emotion to prevail. And real truth is what we seek. Method is really a conscious approach to free the unconscious and the imagination. That's what we're talking about, acting. Method. It's a way of utilizing the things we see, touch, taste, and smell. That's all we use on the stage. Okay, hello? Yeah. How you doing? I'm good, yeah. No, excuse me. I can't talk now. I'm doing an interview. Television. Look, I'll call you back. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Bye. I'm so sorry about that. That's what it's about. Nothing's real on the stage. You have to make it real. There's no one on the other end of the telephone, ever. Is it hot? Is it cold? Tennessee Williams writes a play in which it's 130 degrees. The reason that's there is you want the sensuality / sexuality. You want the sweat. You want the humidity. You can't just say it's hot. I mean, the actor, his instrument needs to be able to do that. I always say, only bad actors show you emotion. How a character hides his feelings tells us who he is. No one tries to cry in life. You try not to. Only bad actors try to cry. Only bad actors try to laugh. Only actors try to be drunk. A drunk wants another drink. He doesn't want anyone. A drunk picks up a glass very carefully. Anyway, what I'm basically saying is, there's 360 degrees of life and your experience to choose from, and how to utilize that so that stuff happens. And all an audience ever wants to believe is what's going on is happening for the first time ever. They don't want to see the rehearsals. In fact, you shouldn't see the rehearsals. It's first time experience, never happened before. That is what we do.
Why is the method system so controversial? Is not the right
Well, because
word.
it's misunderstood. A bunch of people who do interviews and people who are reporters got the wrong idea about it.
What idea do you think they have about it?
Well, they think it's all about playing yourself. It's not playing yourself. It's utilizing the emotions and the palette that everyone has. I mean, the brilliance of the theater and film is that something's going on up there and 1,000 strangers are all experience the same thing if it's real. Now try and get 10 people in your living room to agree on anything. You get 1,000 people all going through the same exact thing where men are fighting tears because something real is going on up there. That's what we strive for, to reach people, to communicate feelings and say, oh, I've been there, I know that. Because all of our feelings are the same, no matter whether we're highly educated, whether we're not well educated, whether we read, the feelings we experience are universal.
What kind of man was Lee Strasberg?
Oh, he was brilliant. He was, again, misunderstood by a lot of people. You know, one of the reasons, I just want to digress for a second. One of the reasons people talk about mumbling and torn T-shirts is because when Marlon Brando came on the scene, he played Stanley Kowalski, who wore a torn T-shirt and didn't speak too well. I mean, he just mumbled because the character was part animal, part man. And that became synonymous with the method, which it has no bearing on. What kind of a man was Lee Strasberg? Brilliant, controversial, even amongst other teachers, because Sanford Meisner and Harold Clurman and Stella Adler and Robert Lewis and all of those taught, and they all disagreed on emphases. The people who went to the neighborhood Playhouse and studied with Sandy Meisner have slightly different terminology. They all wanted the same thing. They all went about it slightly differently, and they all interpreted, let's say, some of the Russian ways slightly differently. But they all strove for the same kind of reality and truth. A human being living in an environment, using that environment as part of his, you know, when an actor from the studio, when he's at home, a set, he tries to make that his home so that you have the feeling that when he goes to a drawer, he knows what's in that drawer, that he knows what the radiator is, generating heat. If it's a cold day, he'll gravitate to that. There's no heat in the radiator, but on a hot day, the window, you know, all those things that people do. It's about behavior. Often what people say and a playwright gives you is that it is a dichotomy with what's really going on inside the actor. How do you do? It's nice to meet you. You don't necessarily take that literally. I'm at a party, I meet you, I see a beautiful girl go by. How do you do? It's really nice to meet you. Anyway, what I'm basically saying is you've got worlds to choose from, and a good actor, a lot of people say, you know, you don't need intelligence to be. I disagree, because you consciously make choices that you hope will impel you to behave in the way that the playwright, author want you to. You know, I mean, Jack Nicholson was my student for 3 years. I don't know if you know that or not. Harry Dean Stanton, Shirley Knight, lots of people have studied with me over the years.
The most famous method actors, Brando, Dean, Montgomery Clift.
Yeah, Jimmy was my best friend.
In fact, Hoffman, Pacino, they've got
De Niro,
and so forth. They're very strong personalities.
yes.
I mean, was having a strong personality sort of not a prerequisite, but if you had a strong personality, you were drawn to the method. You wanted something more extreme.
Well, you're talking about having larger-than-life stuff. Well, I think that you can't give someone that. So the actors who emerge usually have a lot of passion, and Bobby Duvall, Eli. I mean, all of these people are large. They're large. I mean, they've got a tremendous life force, and I think, I mean, to be an actor, to start with, you have to have a desire to do it. It's not easy work, and particularly if you're doing film, you know, you're working 16 hours a day. I mean, you may, at the end of the 10th hour, have a hugely physical scene hanging off things, and at the end of the 12th hour, you have a huge emotional scene to play, where you have to, tears have to emerge. You've got to have that to start with. I mean, wusses don't belong in the theater or film. It's hard work. People don't realize how hard it is. I mean, everyone can walk and talk. I mean, everyone knows how hard it is to be an opera singer, because you have to learn a libretto, often in a foreign language. You have to sing a song on tempo with an orchestra, over the orchestra, bounce your voice off the back wall, and act. Okay, that's tough. Or a dancer has to wake up and stretch for hours at the bar and has to defy gravity. But actors, what are they? Voice, feet, talk, walk. No. I mean, it's as difficult to do it well as it is to do the other things I just mentioned.
Do you actually think that acting as a profession is underestimated by the public in terms of how difficult it actually is?
Well, as I say, there are good actors and not so good actors. A lot of not so good actors are very successful and are stars. Show and tell, you know. Anyway, to do it well is hard, really hard, because you're drawing on everything you are. And also, I mean, the fact that there are so many actors today, I mean, people do a couple of walk-ons on a film and they become members of the Screen Actors Guild in the States. They don't know the first thing about craft, or they haven't read maybe 2 plays in their lives. And so it's cluttered. And to get a job with the process of casting directors and all of that for a young actor to break through is very difficult. To get the job is hard. To get a job in a good play or film is hard. To do it well is hard. To get people to notice you at all is hard. To succeed ultimately and to keep working at it and becoming, a professional actor who makes his living solely from that is hard. You have to be crazy to want to do it. Insane.
James Dean and Steve McQueen were close friends of yours.
Yes.
How is it for you when close friends become icons and legends? I mean, you get this whole outside point of view on James Dean.
Well, Jimmy's frozen in time. I mean, if I go to Prague, I see a T-shirt with Jimmy's picture on it. I see a full-length cutout cardboard in front of a shop. Jimmy in a red jacket with a cigarette from Rebel Without a Cause. He's frozen. I mean, we were the same age. I mean, he died over half a century ago. Because of the impact of what he came along, Elvis, and he came along at a time when young Americans after the war there was a great deal of unrest in teenage young men, early 20s. Up until then, the grown-ups, adults, set the styles, music, suddenly began to change. Jimmy epitomized that change. He looked like the boy next door, but he wasn't. He did 20-some television shows in which he played a rebel, a guy wanting to break out. And the 3 film roles that he did, only 3. Same thing. The 2 Broadway plays he did, same thing. So he expressed what was going on inside of every young American's heart. Elvis was the first white man to sing black music. Black singers couldn't get played on white stations in America. Elvis did. Brought a different thrust to the music. And then Otis Redding wrote Dock of the Bay, because all of his songs previous to that, he wrote Dock of the Bay for a white audience. And it was the first time a black artist played on white stations in America. So there was a time in our history when Elvis and Jimmy and blacks were asserting themselves. It was a cultural revolution happening, and Jimmy and Marlon and Monty Clift, all studio members, changed things. So the impact of the Actors Studio has been enormous.
Did you feel at the time that this was something revolutionary?
Well, I did, because Jimmy was my best friend and we were aware of what was happening. We were. I don't know if anyone else was. I mean, what I'm saying to you is not only retrospective, but of the time. I mean, I was aware that Jimmy was a new kind of actor in that age range. He wasn't Mickey Rooney, he was Jimmy Dean. Marlon was... Jimmy, at that point in the first film, in East of Eden, was a boy. even though he was 23 years old. And Rebel, he played a high school boy, and he was close to 24. He died when he was 24. And you have to realize, I mean, in a short period of time, he did 2 plays on Broadway, a couple of off-Broadway plays, 20-some live television shows, and 3 motion pictures, and he died at 24. I mean, it's pressure cooker.
If I can ask a few questions about you and your films for a moment. Working with Hitchcock on North by Northwest.
Very interesting. I liked it very much. Thank you for asking.
What kind of man was he?
Well, I liked him. He left me alone. I was directors, you know. I would walk up, because he'd whisper something to Cary Grant. And I came from the theater where, you know, he never said anything to me about the work. I had tea with him and stuff, but so I said, is there anything you want to tell me? I'll only tell you if I don't like what you're doing. So I just did. I played the character, though it wasn't written that way, as homosexual, which was very interesting in the 50s, because it was written as a henchman. But the character wanted to get rid of Eva Marie Saint with such a vengeance. I thought I'd add this element. Hitchcock saw me in a play with Paddy-Chayefsky, in which I played a hip musician, a very macho, stupid, egocentric, insensitive guy. It was Paddy-Chayefsky's play, Middle of the Night. I did it on Broadway for a year with Edward G. Robinson, and Jenna Rollins played my wife. And then I toured with it for 6 months. As I was all over the place. Hitchcock came opening night. Sinatra was there that night at the Biltmore Theater in Los Angeles, and Hitchcock and Sinatra were there. The reason I mentioned Sinatra is because my character mentioned Sinatra in that play. So Sinatra was there when I was noodling on the piano, and Sinatra was sitting in the second row, and Hitchcock was there. And I got a call to come to MGM. As that character in Middle of the Night, I was all over the place. As Leonard in Middle of the Night, it was very economical, very contained, very quiet, very smart, very dangerous. And when I asked him, I said, how did you see me in that play and cast me in this? He said, Martin, you have a circus going on inside of you. Obviously, if you can play that part in the theater, you can do this little trinket. So I got along great with him. That's a long answer.
Sidney Lumet told me that for him there was absolutely no difference directing Albert Finney, who we call the British theatrical tradition, or Al Pacino, method. What was the relationship between method actors and the directors? I mean, was there ever conflict, or was the best director, I mean, Hitchcock, well, you say, let you just get on with it?
You're talking, good directors are good directors with a vision and clarity. Good actors are good actors. When we talk about the method, it's just a process, a technique to get what's inside outside when you want it and need it, to hit the right notes. I always say, you know, if you have a Stradivarius and you don't play well, I don't give a damn what the hell you do. It's going to sound awful. And if you have a cheap violin and you're awful good at it, you'll sound better than that fellow who owns an expensive violin. So tuning that instrument is important. When directors, people talk in results, I want you to speed it up. The actor knows, if he has the tools, he knows how to do that organically without just speeding it up. I mean, finding the way to do that so that it doesn't interrupt the life of the character. Just talking fast, you know. I want you to get very angry here, or something. Very angry, okay. Why? You know, he gets angry later on. I don't think we should play the third act and the first act. We got a long way to go. Why don't I get angry and not let it out here? I think we're spilling too much. We know the possibility of his violence too early. That's what a good method actor will say to a director who says, I want that now. you'll appeal on a logical level, saying, well, you know, shouldn't it be more contained here so that when it finally happens, we're shocked? That's how you communicate with a director, no matter how he's trained or how I mean, you have a point of view and you should express that. And if you're clear enough about it and know how to talk about it, he'll probably buy your suggestion.
Mission Impossible.
How about that? Mission Impossibile. I think we're running out of film.
That's not good.
I see the light blinking and winking.
Oh, okay. Mission Impossible. How did you end up in that?
Well, Bruce Geller was a young writer who came to my acting classes, and the classes, as I mentioned, with Jack Nicholson and Harry Dean Stanton, and he was a young writer, wanted to learn about actors, so he came to acting classes and functioned in those classes. And he created Mission Impossible. He wrote it and was exec producer of it. And my ex-wife, Barbara Bain, was in my acting class. And he basically wrote this character for me. It was originally called Martin Land. And I said, you know, that I only was supposed to do the pilot, the first one. Barbara, on the other hand, was a continuing character because he needed, and Barbara is a method-trained actress. I mean, also a member of the Actors Studio and often teaches sessions there. He wanted, in Barbara, he wanted Marilyn Monroe and Grace Kelly in the same person, someone who could play that and that. Barbara could. She had an elegance. She could also play a little less elegant. And he knew that I could, because hanging around with me, he knew that I could talk all kinds of ways, like Germans, and I could talk like New York Italians if I want to. You know what I mean? Hey, do yourself a favor and behave yourself. Oh, a New York Irish guy. This guy, you know, it's sort of like Jimmy Cagney had this kind of sound, Carol O'Connor, Charlie Durning. So I could play Italiano, sì, vero. Up here, talk like this, but the New York Italians are different. The parents talk like this, up here, right in the front of the mouth. So he had me in mind for this role of a man of 1,000 faces. And I was just going to do the first one, in which I played a South American dictator, then we kidnap him, and I impersonate him, and a 90-year-old man, and my character, several roles. Anyway, I did the pilot, and they wanted me on the series. They said, well, don't let him go. And I refused to sign a series deal. So I was a continuing guest star until the first year. Special appearance by Martin Landau, it said. And I originated that billing. No one had ever used it before, special. Now it's all over the place. Never before. Special appearance by Martin Landau. And with 2 weeks' notice, I could get out of the series. But I did 28 shows the first year. And then I signed to do the second year because of the show took off. By the end of the first year, we were in 69 countries, dubbed into about 20 languages. And it was a major hit. Now, I had been offered Star Trek before that, the Spock character, which I turned down because I didn't want to play a character without emotion. And Lenny played that. And then when I left Mission, Lenny replaced me. So, and it's all insidious.
Did you feel that you wish you had done Star Trek?
Oh, no. I would have died. To play a character without emotion? That's like, it would kill me. It's the antithesis of what I do. Lenny was better suited for it. Much better suited for it. Much better suited for it. I promise you. Yeah. I promise you.
Ed Wood, the film for which you won the Oscar.
Yes, it was my third nomination and my first win.
You seem very, very proud of the film at the time.
I had fun with Johnny and Tim. We had a great time. It was fun. I love to have a good time. If I ever write a book, it's going to be called Acting Should Be Fun, Can Be Fun, Must Be Fun. Yes, I watched a lot of Lugosi movies. I became enamored of him. And you know, he was a morphine addict and alcoholic, and he was sick. And And I watched a movie called Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It makes Ed Wood's movies look like Gone with the Wind. But it was terrible. But on this island is a castle, and in the castle is a mad scientist. And the mad scientist injects monkeys with a serum that overnight turns them into a man in a terrible gorilla suit, Bela Lugosi. And in this milieu, in this movie, which is horrendous, he still had, I mean, I watched him in this and my heart went out to him because I saw him still trying to work. He's old, he's sick, and it's stupefying that this role, and yet he brought dignity to it and credence to it. And it's stuff like that that I tried to bring to the film. And I also, you know, I knew that nowadays you can go to a video store and get Lugosi. I mean, more people, you know, I mean, in days gone by, I mean, the chances of seeing a Lugosi movie, it would be very late night television occasionally. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted the Hungarian accent to be perfect. I wanted the behavior, which is unlike mine. I mean, my energy goes right to my fingertips. He had a much softer hand, a lot of teeth. Me, no teeth, black hole, okay, you know. So I changed, you know, that's when my training came in. By the time I started, I could have tap danced or juggled as Lugosi. I didn't have to think anymore. He had invaded me or I invaded him, but I was, and Tim always called me Bela, and most of the time Johnny called me Bela. When I walked on the set without makeup, they treated me as an interloper. I mean, who is this man? Anyway.
When you look back on your career, what are the experiences you treasure most?
Oh, I mean, everything I've done, I've got stories that could go on for hours. Everything's an experience. I mean, treasure most, my God, living, I treasure most. Experiencing everything I have, working with all the people I've worked. I mean, I worked with Cary Grant, James Mason, Barbara Stanwyck, Burt Lancaster. I worked with Judith Anderson, you know, great stage actors, and my friends. I mean, it's impossible to say, pick out one thing out of all. Was probably the day I was born. It was probably the most important day of my life.
Well, without it, none of this would have happened. That's for
well,
sure.
I mean, what I'm basically saying is, you know, I treasure life. I think life is a gift, and I really don't have any regrets. And I've, you know, turned down things, lost things, found things, and it's been an interesting journey, and it still is. And I'll still keep doing it till I get it right.
Are you enthusiastic about the new generation of filmmakers?
Yeah. Well, there's again, you know, there's talent and there's less than talent. There's visions. There's things to be said. I mean, it really depends on the individual, doesn't it? And the group. There'll always be good stuff and mediocre stuff and bad stuff, no matter, you know. I mean, and now with everybody being able to hold a camera that is high definition, there's gonna be a plethora of crap. I mean, everybody in this world can make a movie, you know, a couple of lights. And, you know, when I started, there were no reflex cameras in Hollywood. I don't know if you know, you had a Mitchell B, big camera, viewfinder here, lens here, parallax, the closer you got. Those guys had to compensate. In other words, what they saw in the viewfinder was not what the lens was seeing. They had to compensate. They were never soft. They were always in focus. They were always framed properly. Today, you see what you got, soft, badly framed, poor movement, jiggles. Why? So I'm saying, those guys spent years becoming a cameraman. Years. Today, there's so much stuff. Guys spend half an hour. There were things that no one knows that will die with my generation.
Martin Landau. Thank you very much indeed. I don't want to say privilege, honor, etc., but it is.
Thank you.